Coming up next on KPBS Evening Edition, the final defendant in an Iraq war crimes trial makes a deal with prosecutors. We'll talk with the Time magazine reporter who first broke the story of the killings in Haditha.
And California's Attorney General has joined in the lawsuit opposing San Diego's regional transportation plan. KPBS Evening Edition starts now.
Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Joanne Ferrian.
And I'm Peggy Pico, in for Dwayne Brown.
The trial of a Marine accused of killing unarmed Iraqi civilians, including women and children, has ended today with a plea deal. Staff Sergeant Frank Wooderich has pleaded guilty to dereliction of duty in connection with the deaths of 24 Iraqis in the town of Haditha. KPBS senior Metro reporter Allison St. John was there as he entered his plea at Camp Pendleton. She joins us now by phone. Allison, now this is the first time we heard from Wooderich. What did he have to say?
Well, he appeared very sober and resigned as he pleaded guilty. He said that, yes, indeed, he had used words like shoot first, ask questions later to his squad members as they entered the homes nearby after a bomb had killed one of his Marines. He did use the word tragic as one of the consequences and said he probably should have said nothing to his men. It's interesting, though, because this particular plea that he has made is the charges have really changed since the beginning of this case. They began as murder charges, then they were downgraded to voluntary manslaughter charges, and he pleaded not guilty to those. Now he's just pleading to one count of negligent dereliction of duty, which is even less than willful dereliction of duty.
So sentencing begins tomorrow. What can we expect?
Well, the maximum sentence that's being proposed under the plea deal is 3 months in the brig, and then 2/3 of his pay would be cut during that 3 months, plus he would have a demotion down to the lowest rank in the Marine Corps. So this is actually the end of the final war crimes trial from the Iraq War, and it seems like the consequences are fairly minor.
KPBS reporter Allison St. John. And in just a few minutes, we will talk with a reporter who first broke the story of the Haditha killings back in 2006.
California's Attorney General and the Sierra Club have joined in a lawsuit opposing a regional transportation plan for San Diego. KPBS reporter Ed Joyce joins us with the details. And Ed, why today's lawsuit?
Well, the Sierra Club and the California Attorney General agree with the Center for Biological Diversity and the Cleveland National Forest Foundation that Sandag's 2050 $200 billion regional transportation plan would harm the environment and relies more on freeways than mass transit.
And why did the state attorney general, why are they getting involved right now?
The Attorney General believes that the plan that expands freeways over mass transit would be injurious to the health and would worsen climate change. She's also concerned about the effects on AB 32, which is the greenhouse gas or global warming solution law in the state, and that expanding freeways would create more opportunities for more pollution and thereby violate the Greenhouse Gas Warming Solutions Act, which seeks to reduce greenhouse gases.
Yeah, it sounds like she has some specific details on that. Now, what does Sandag have to say about it?
Sandag believes, as it has said before when the lawsuits were originally filed in November, the original lawsuits, that their plan is fair and balanced and considers mass transit and other options and is the best plan for the region.
All right, thank you. That's KPBS reporter Ed Joyce.
San Diego Mayor Jerry Sanders is speaking out against a published proposal for a new Charger Stadium and expanded convention center. On Sunday, UT San Diego pushed for a huge project, including a new Charger Stadium, a new indoor sports arena, and a convention center expansion that's bigger than the one already planned. The UT says it would cost about $1.5 billion. The UT plan would put the Charger Stadium on port property. Sanders says there would be too many battles to fight over that location and that the project would therefore take too long. He supports a proposal for a stadium in the East Village, and he says the financing plan is nearly done. A citizens watchdog group is calling for public hearings on a proposal to bill San Diego gas and electric customers for uninsured wildfire costs. SDG&E has already asked the State Public Utilities Commission to have ratepayers cover those costs for future wildfires. Now, the utility wants to make it retroactive to the 2007 fires, some of which were started by SDG&E's lines. The company says it's not opposed to public hearings on its request.
A judge says the city of San Diego is too cozy with Qualcomm founder Irwin Jacobs when it comes to revamping the Plaza de Panama in Balboa Park. Jacob wants to build an access road and a parking garage to relieve traffic congestion in the park. Last year, the city signed a memorandum with Jacobs about the project. Now, a Superior Court judge says that memorandum amounts to a project approval, and that an environmental review should have been done first. The city attorney's office has not responded to a request for comment. In full disclosure, Irwin Jacobs is a supporter of KPBS. UC San Diego Health System spent $18 million to buy the bankrupt Nevada Cancer Institute. The CEO of UCSD Health System says cash reserves paid for the purchase and no taxpayer dollars were spent, but the deal includes another $20 million to be philanthropically raised for the out-of-state cancer center. UCSD Health also bought the San Diego Cancer Center last summer. More now on the conclusion to the biggest and longest-running criminal case against U.S. troops in the Iraq War. Exactly what happened that November day in Haditha back in 2005 was the subject of a Time magazine investigative report. Joanne has reaction to the verdict from the reporter who broke the story at the roundtable.
As you just heard, Staff Sergeant Frank Wooderich, the final Marine to be charged in the biggest criminal case against U.S. troops, pled guilty to dereliction of duty, a misdemeanor. Journalist Tim McGurk broke the story of the Haditha killings back in 2006 when he was a Time magazine correspondent. He is now the managing editor of the investigative reporting program at UC Berkeley. He joins me via Skype from his home in Santa Cruz. Thank you, Tim, for being here.
Hi.
Now, you wrote this story in 2006, but it was months after the killings actually happened. Why was it not reported originally?
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. I mean, the first reason is that it happened in a distant part of Iraq, which is really part of the Sunni triangle where there was a lot of fighting going on. And it wasn't safe for journalists or really people who didn't come from that particular town to even go there. So I had to rely on some Iraqi human rights activists who brought me a video. And the video showed, it was raw footage, and it showed sadly, it showed dead bodies, and they were being unzipped from body bags at the morgue in Haditha.
Now,
and, yeah, sorry.
Were you also able to interview some of the family members of those killed as well?
Yes, I did. I interviewed the family members. There was a small girl and her young brother who actually survived the massacre because their mother had thrown her body in front of them when one of the Marines entered the room where they were all hiding and opened fire on them. So we managed to convince her to come down with her relatives to the Time Bureau in Baghdad and talk to us.
What did she tell you?
Well, she explained how they had heard the IED, the roadside bomb, explode. They'd heard a lot of shouting and commotion, and it wasn't the first time that had happened in their neighborhood. So they did what they always did. They had a routine, and that routine is that they would herd all of the women, children, and the old grandfather who was in a wheelchair into the big room in the house. And then this girl's father would go in and start reciting the Quran as a kind of form of protection that they hoped. And this had always worked in the past, except this time the Marines came bursting into the house and opened fire first on her father, who was praying and reciting the Quran. Then they entered the room where the family was huddled, and then opened fire to them too.
Including the man in the wheelchair?
Including the grandfather in the wheelchair, yes.
Now, when you brought all of this information to the military, as you did, I believe even before the story was published, what was the military's reaction?
Well, I mean, at first the military reaction was when I went back and after seeing this video, I did a Google search and I found out what the Marines' version of what had happened at the time. And there was a short little Marine Corps communique that said that there had been this roadside bomb. It killed a Marine, wounded another, and that it also killed a large number of Iraqi civilians. And everything that I saw from this video seemed to, the fact that these women and children were still wearing their pajamas, they were in their night clothes. And Iraq's a very conservative society. They don't wander out in the street. Most of the damage, the explosion, and the bullet marks were inside the house, not on the exterior of the building. So the Marines' their first response is, "You've got to be kidding! You know, you've been duped by Al Qaeda. This is part of a plot to a propagandist plot to discredit the Marines." But the more I probed, and the more I got testimony from people in the village, other people, from the doctor at the morgue, it gave me a substantial body of evidence, including the eyewitness testimony. And then I gave all of this to the Marines, and I said, "Look, we're not going to publish anything, but we want you we want to hear your side of the story." And the colonel in charge said, "Well, look, based on what you've shown and told me, I think there's enough to warrant a formal investigation." And that investigation went on for about a year and a half.
We know now, as we fast forward, there were, I believe, 8 Marines who were charges. They had charges against them. Many of them dropped. One of them acquitted. And now, so the last man standing, this is sort of the term that's been used in terms of Frank Woodridge, a plea deal, a misdemeanor charge, maximum sentence is 3 minutes in jail. How do you react? 3 months in jail. How do you react to the sort of the end of this story?
Well, I'm, frankly a bit. I know that the Staff Sergeant Woodridge has been, suffering for 6 years as this trial has been stretched out interminably. But I think you also have to put yourself in the shoes of the relatives of these 24 unarmed civilian Iraqis who were killed. And they've been following this trial with great interest, I would imagine. And they're seeing that the man who is responsible for the killing of these 24 unarmed civilians is getting away with a 3-month stint in the brig. And I think that they'll be very dismayed about that, too.
Well, thank you so much, Tim McGurk, former Time correspondent who broke the original story in Haditha. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Time is running out for California's redevelopment agencies. In a moment, a look at San Diego neighborhoods where redevelopment worked and where it didn't. And the state Supreme Court is getting involved in the fight over medical marijuana dispensaries. This is KPBS Evening Edition.
Tonight on KPBS. At 8, Antiques Roadshow is in Eugene, Oregon, on the banks of the scenic McKenzie River for a bit of fishing and a look into the antique fly fishing gear market. Then at 9, Antiques Roadshow is in Houston, Texas, to visit the Beer Can House and learn about valuable collectible beer containers. And at 10, on Himalaya with Michael Palin, Michael takes the high road to Lhasa to see for himself what the Chinese have done to Tibet. That's all tonight on KPBS.
I'm Ray Suarez. On the next news hour, we'll look at the winners and losers in South Carolina as the GOP presidential hopefuls head to Florida. That's Monday on the PBS NewsHour.
In the last year, KPBS News has been honored with nearly 36 awards. I'm extremely proud of these honors, and I thank you for your support as we continue to serve our local communities with award-winning news coverage in the years to come.
KPBS Evening Edition is made possible by Joan and Erwin Jacobs and by
Redevelopment advocates are bemoaning a recent court decision that eliminated their agencies throughout the state. And while redevelopment worked in some areas of San Diego, it wasn't successful across the board. KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr looks at where it worked and where it didn't.
When you mention redevelopment in San Diego, downtown inevitably comes up. It was the first project area in the city and widely judged as the most successful. The scope of what redevelopment has accomplished in downtown can be clearly seen in this model put together by the Center City Development Corporation, or CCDC. Everything in white depicts a project where redevelopment money was used. CCDC Board Chair Kim Kilkenny says the organization's ability to approve and fast-track projects contributes to its success. He says the elimination of redevelopment could hurt the neighborhood.
We will not have the public revenues to spend for public infrastructure that has in the past proved to attract private development. So it's going to be hurtful.
The Horton Plaza shopping mall was the first redevelopment project built in downtown San Diego. The impact of redevelopment is obvious in this neighborhood, but its benefits aren't as clear-cut in other parts of the city.
One of the things to keep in mind is that redevelopment by its nature is risky.
Michael Jenkins is a former redevelopment attorney and served on San Diego's redevelopment agency in the 1990s. He says on average about 50% of redevelopment areas in California are unsuccessful, though he says San Diego fares a bit better. Still, he says redevelopment involves complex deals with a lot of moving parts, and sometimes things just don't pan out, like with this project near San Diego State University.
Redevelopment has done some initial first steps, but it hasn't really reached the premise that the area wanted, despite a lot of support from the neighborhoods. There were some disagreements between SDSU officials and city officials about how to proceed, and as a consequence, things just never got done.
But Jenkins says the least successful area in the city is probably Barrio Logan. A major project is finally underway there more than 20 years after the neighborhood was declared a redevelopment area. Other places like North Park have had some success using redevelopment funds to restore neighborhood landmarks. City Heights has used redevelopment to build affordable housing projects, as have other neighborhoods. But for all the projects they've gotten off the ground, redevelopment agencies have seen their fair share of scandal. Former CCDC President Nancy Graham was accused of having a conflict of interest with a developer. She later resigned. Two former leaders at San Diego's Southeastern Economic Development Corporation recently pleaded guilty to embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars in public money. Current SCDC President Jerry Grooms acknowledges that hurt the agency.
Without question, I think, not only does it hamper your progress, but, it impacts your credibility as well.
But Grooms is focusing on moving forward, and he maintains SCDC has been successful in creating jobs and other economic opportunities for the community. He points to the Imperial Marketplace as one of the area's most successful projects. SCDC helped prepare the land to make it suitable for development.
And that, as an example, is probably close to a $50 million development. And, it never would have been achievable if a developer had come in and had to start from square one.
Grooms was confirmed to his job the day Governor Jerry Brown announced he wanted to eliminate redevelopment. Grooms says he just needs more time to get things done. It's a common refrain from redevelopment areas, no matter how successful they are.
That was Katie Orr reporting. The new law requires redevelopment agencies to shut down by February 1st, but it is possible that deadline may be extended. Now an update to a story we've been covering for months. Both federal prosecutors and San Diego City Attorney have been cracking down on medical marijuana dispensaries. Joanne has the latest on yet another court challenge at the roundtable.
The California Supreme Court is getting involved in the medical marijuana debate. Last week, the court voted unanimously to review whether cities can ban medical marijuana dispensaries. To try and sort out what that means here in San Diego, we have two guests, Greg Schultz, director of San Diego Medical Marijuana Collective, and Alex Kreit, former chair of the city's Medical Marijuana Task Force and professor at Thomas Jefferson School of Law. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alex, I want to start with you. First of all, what will the Supreme Court look at specifically?
Well, there's two general issues. One is, can localities ban medical marijuana dispensaries outright? A number of localities throughout the state have instituted bans of these medical marijuana dispensaries, and the question is that in conflict with state law that allows these dispensaries? And if so, is that still okay, or can are these localities not allowed to do that? The second question it relates to the relationship between federal law and state and local law. These localities that haven't instituted bans, a lot of them have zoning and permitting laws. And there's a question, can these permitting laws coexist with federal law? A state, it's very clear that a state can have these medical marijuana laws generally that say you have an affirmative defense to a criminal prosecution if you're a medical marijuana patient. But an intermediate court held if you have a permitting system, that goes beyond just allowing medical marijuana, and it authorizes medical marijuana. And the intermediate court said if you authorize it with a permit type of system, that conflicts with federal law, that's preempted.
So we know Poway is the most recent city in our county to actually ban these dispensaries. Now, here in the city of San Diego, we also have this other sort of third limbo area where we don't have an ordinance, and by virtue of not having one, the city attorney has said, well, that means all of them are operating illegally. So I want to turn this over to you now, Greg. You operate a dispensary. What's the status of your operation?
Well, the status is we're open and we're proceeding forward as normal. The city attorney is actually closing the dispensaries down using a no zoning idea. He's saying that there is no zoning for dispensaries, therefore they're violating the zoning codes. And unfortunately, he's kind of done an end run on the system, because under normal situation, that all of those operations would be done internally through the city building department and code enforcement, and then at some point, if it was kept being fought and stuff, it would end up in Superior Court. These are going directly to Superior Court right out the gate. So, and that's actually not something that we believe is really correct.
I just want to play a clip for the city attorney, Jan Goldsmith. We had him on the air a couple months ago. He told us that I think at the time there were at least more than 80 sort of actions his office had taken against dispensaries. We know a lot of them had been served with papers. But the question that we asked, and we want to play a clip in terms of what he says, is if you shut all these dispensaries down, where will people go to get medical marijuana? And here's what he had to say.
Call your congressman or call the president, because the acquisition, purchase, the transportation or use of marijuana is a crime under federal law. Forget about state law. Federal law preempts.
So, Alex, he says, forget about state law, federal law preempts. Is that true?
Well, that is actually one of the very questions that the California Supreme Court is going to be taking up in these cases. And it's clear that federal law doesn't preempt in some areas. For example, the state can have its medical marijuana laws that says a patient is allowed to possess marijuana for medical purposes under state law. What is not clear is whether federal law preempts a zoning permitting type of scheme. And that is the very question that the California Supreme Court is going to take up. So as far as Jan Goldsmith's statement that federal law preempts state law, that's a question that's unknown at this point in time. That's something that's going to be decided by the California Supreme Court shortly.
Greg, do we know how many dispensaries are still operating in the city of San Diego?
There's approximately 25 right at the moment.
And so I think also at the heart of this discussion is if all of these dispensaries get shut down, ultimately there are still people who have legitimate medical marijuana cards. Where are they going now, do we know, in terms of filling those prescriptions?
Most of them, we hope, are finding themselves going to a collective that's open, but some of them will be forced to suffer. Some of them will be forced to go back to regulated prescription drugs that, they left because they were, bad for them in other ways. Some of them will, in turn, make what we have basically knocked out and gotten rid of. Some of them will bring back the illegal cartel dealings and stuff like that.
We'll have to leave it there. Greg Schultz and Alex Cray, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The
legendary lawman who tamed Tombstone.
Wyatt Earp becomes the symbol of Western law and order.
He lives in history as a hero, but to some who knew him, he was a cold-blooded killer. Wyatt Earp on American Experience.
Tuesday at 8 on KPBS.
Because of our members, it's possible for everyone around us to discover something new every day, right here on KPBS. And in doing so, our members make this a better and stronger community. Thanks for your support.
On Frontline,
meth has destroyed this community.
Methamphetamine is a highly addictive drug.
She looked 20 years older than she was.
Can this epidemic be stopped?
Back home, it was tearing lives apart. Here in Congress, it was as if there was no problem at all.
The meth epidemic. Watch Frontline.
Tuesday at 10 on KPBS.
Welcome back to the Public Square on KPBS Evening Edition. A couple of weeks ago, we reported fundraisers met their $32 million goal for Phase 2 of the new downtown San Diego library. An anonymous donor pledged $15 million to cover the shortfall. Well, Scott Waselis, who lives in East Village, had this to say. So, thanks to a donor, the building is paid for. Great, but will he or she create a trust so that it will be open more than 36 hours a week? The current library is essentially unusable, not because of facility limitations, but because of operating hours. From my apartment, I see a trendy doorstop rather than a city resource. Well, we can tell you this, Scott. Private money is being raised for operating costs. So far, according to the foundation's website, they have raised $10 million to cover additional operating costs. And we will keep you posted on this story. Now, something I want to ask you about. Did you happen to see this in yesterday's paper? What do you think? First of all, the proposal to create a new stadium, sports arena, and expanded convention center on San Diego's waterfront. And now the second question, what do you think of the paper's new owner, Papa Doug Manchester, using the front page of the paper to promote his grand idea? Let me know what you think. Now, you can weigh in on this conversation by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, or just email me directly, jfarian@kpbs.org. And now let's go back to the news desk where Peggy has a recap of tonight's top stories.
The final defendant in the Haditha war crimes trial pleaded guilty today to dereliction of duty. Staff Sergeant Frank Wuderich faces a possible 90 days in confinement, along with a demotion and a 2/3 forfeiture of pay. And California's Attorney General and the Sierra Club have joined in a lawsuit opposing a transportation plan approved by the San Diego Association of Governments. The lawsuit claims the environmental impact report prepared for the plan does not adequately address air pollution and climate concerns. The suit also claims the plan expands freeways at the expense of public transit. You can watch and comment on any of the stories you saw tonight on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. And we have an important program notice. We will not be on the air tomorrow night. Instead, we'll bring you President Barack Obama's State of the Union address, beginning at 6 p.m. right here on KPBS TV. Until then, we leave you with a look at the forecast.